Hey, hello, I'm Kevin. Thanks for joining me for this tutorial on how to make a kind of a crowd in Unreal Engine using static meshes and the Vertex Anim toolkit. It's going to look a little bit like this. This is the kind of thing that maybe you want for one of these stadium kind of situations, or maybe you've got some other kind of use case where you need a crowd and you don't want to get too close to them, or maybe hang on them too long. So this won't work in every situation. There are going to be many situations where this will fall apart and you start to see a lot of repetition. But, maybe it will work for your situation like it did for mine. So I started working on this because someone asked me to help them with a music video that they were working on, and they wanted to fill out this really beautiful environment that's on the marketplace with some crowd in the background. And they didn't need to be super realistic or anything. So I asked them if they would get me some Mixamo characters, just a couple to start with, and just a couple of motions, which they did. And I'm going to walk you through how I eventually got to what you see here. So when I went to look for a solution here, I found this plugin which looked ideal for what I wanted, which was to take animation that's already inside of the engine and to bake it into Vertex textures. And that's exactly what this plugin does, but it says here not for sale. And the reason that is it's been open sourced. It says right here, and you can find it on GitHub. There's also an example project and documentation, and there's even a long forum thread here about this. All these links are right here in this message. So I have already downloaded this, and I've also already downloaded this example project. And in the interest of not making a super long video, I've even set up a scene a little bit here with some characters and this environment. So I'm not going to be able to get all the way into our fully fleshed out, elaborate scene here. But I will tell you what I did to set this up. So I'll put this away. Here's what I have set up in advance. So I've only set up this environment, which is a beautiful environment available in the marketplace, and a couple of characters that are from Mixamo. And because they're from Mixamo, I'm able to share the same skeleton from both of these characters and load a single set of animations. So I've got 5 animations and 2 characters, and both characters can use these same animations. I could show you that. So we'll put both of these characters in here, and we'll set them both to use the same animation asset. And then we'll set them to update in editor so you can see that they're moving. So I also have open here this demo scene. So something to specify about this example project, 2 things actually. One, the example project and the toolset I've downloaded here. The toolset has a folder here, which is the folder that goes with, this is basically the plugin that goes in your plugins folder. And the example project didn't come with a plugins folder, so I created this and I added that. Hey, so I remembered that the plugin is not actually required for that demo project. The project is just playing back data that has already been generated and only requires the material functions that are inside the project already. It doesn't require the plugin unless you are going to generate new data. So that part wasn't required. It's useful to know if you're shipping like a game or something and you don't want to include that plugin, or you're sharing your project with somebody and you don't need to share that plugin if they're just using the data. I also updated this to 4.27, and the reason I did that is because my target project is 4.27, and I wanted to make sure that the plugin compiled and worked as expected, and I can tell you that it does. So once you open this, you will need the compiling toolchain, your Visual Studio community installed in order for this to compile, like any other code plugin. But once you do that, you will get your project open, but on the way to that, it will pop up a message that says this was written for 4.26 and says something like incompatible. You just click through that and it works fine. So So you can see a number of amazing features that are in here, including frame interpolation. You could use LODs on these instances. You can even, over here, you can see you can have massive numbers of agents. But what we're concerned with here is this example here, where we've got one actor showing 5 motions. Now, how is that being done? Well, I'll show you. It's a blueprint that has instance static mesh component, and on that component are 5 instances specified down here in the instances section. Each of these has a different transform offset by 150 units. And then down here, there's a custom data array specified, and each of these has a different number, and each of those is referencing a different animation. So if we put them all at 4, everybody's going to die because they're all getting the dying animation. So this is exactly what we're going to do in our project. How's that working? How is that being done? Let's look at this material. So this material, these are 2 materials applied to these 2 rows of objects. And this is the master material. And we'll look at the instance first. Now these instances, these are anim instances, have 4 different animations, 5 different animations specified on them, each with a number of frames, and I'll explain how all this works in a moment. But for this, all we really need to know for the moment is that this is where the magic is for this particular animation, and we want to move that magic over to our project. So I'm going to grab these. I don't need that one because it's just another instance with some different options. But I'm going to migrate these over to my demo project. We'll say yes. And now I don't need this. I'll minimize it. Now over here in my project, I have those things. I have those 2 materials. This is a material function. This is the base material, and this is an instance. I'm going to rename these things into Vertex Anim Master, we'll call this. And we'll call this one MI Vertex Anim Instance. Okay, and I'll rename this as well. Toolkit. So now we want to get some of that same magic happening for our characters. Let's set this up as per the instructions. So we need to make, in the miscellaneous, a data asset. So this is a data asset, and we're going to use the class called Vertex Animation Profile. And we'll select that and create that right here, and we'll call it VAP for Vertex Animation Profile, and we'll give it the name of this character. Now this is a data object where you set a few parameters and then you run a tool and then it fills in and sets other parameters. So there are 2 types of animations that you can do here, vertex animation or bone animation. They're really kind of similar. They both are going to generate a texture, and then through the magic of GPUs and shading material functions, it's going to move vertices around. One of them is going to use bones and bone information in that texture. The other is going to use vertices and vertex information in that texture. We're going to use the bone animation method, and it allows for longer animation sequences and larger meshes, this method. So all you have to do is pick one of these 2 things and then add animations to it. So we're going to add all 5 of our animations. And each of these is going to have some number of frames. So you can see over on the right there, it says number of keys 88. I'd point to it, but it will go away as soon as I move my mouse over there. But this has 88 keys. And I could put 88 here for the number of frames, but you can also do interpolation and put some smaller number, and it will interpolate between those frames. So for example, I had longer sequences that were about 300 or 400 frames in my final project, and I was interpolating them on threes by just basically doing that. So let's do that for our other animations. The longer your animations, the more texture real estate that you need. But thankfully, the plugin sizes these textures all by itself. You don't have to think about that too much. So this one has 67 keys. We'll just leave that at 67. That's not very many. We'll add another one. They can do different amounts of interpolation. 1, 2, 3. And this one has 106. 106 divided by 3. Add another one. 1, 2, 3, 4. This one has 288. And our last one, 5. That one's got 134. Now, each of these is, when we run, is going to fill out the other parts of these 3 values, and these are also going to get filled out. So that's all you need to do, is specify your animations and the number of frames that you want to bake, and then you save this. And you open this. This is the skeletal mesh, and the plugin has added this new button. And when you click it, it's going to ask you for the data object that we're going to read that information from and write our results to. And when you hit OK, it's going to do that, and it's also going to create 3 new assets. One of them is a static mesh, and 2 of them are textures, which store the data that we asked for. So here's the static mesh, and here's the data that we asked for. And on the static mesh, we've gotten 2 new UV sets here and here. And we can see, oh, I meant to turn that off, none. And here we can see some values have been set in these other fields. Now these values are going to be needed for the material. Here's our textures, and here it says it's made these 2 UV sets. So now to get this static mesh animated, let's bring it in here right next to the skeletal mesh. So these 2 are skeletal meshes. This is a static mesh, and we want to animate this. So to do this, we go over here to our magic materials and use the example that we got over here. So let's investigate how this is working. So if we zoom out, we can see here that the material attributes for the look of this thing are just using the world material, world grid. We don't need any of that, so let's get rid of that. And let's add some textures. Parameter 2D, one of these. And we will call this base color. And plug it in here. And we'll make 2 more of those. One for the roughness, which I think, if I recall correctly, we have glossy coming from Mixamo, and this is a normal. And we maybe would be smart to change this to the, what is it called? Basic normal, flat normal. Yeah, flat normal sounds good. We'll put this in the normal, and we'll put this into, before we put this in the roughness, let's do a 1 minus, so that we get the inverse of glossiness is roughness. And we're going to say that's good enough for our look. Let's save that. And so that's everything related to the look. Over here, we have something related to texture coordinates and corrected normals. And then down here is where all of this magic is happening for moving our components, particularly these two functions. These two functions are doing all of the magic using these two textures. So we have different textures, so these would actually be quite useful as a parameter. And this one's called bone position. And this one is called bone rotation. And I also know from experience that this max value setting is one of our data points that we get from here. It's this one here, max value position bone. So let's make that also a parameter. Max value bone pose or something like that. Let's save that. And I believe that is all we need to do in here, at least for now. And now let's make an instance for this particular character. So here is an instance that's pointing to that. So let's just reuse that. Let's move it over here into materials. We can move that. And then we'll edit this to be suitable for this character. Let's toggle all of these and plug in all of our maps. So the base color and the glossy and the normal and specular we're going to ignore. Diffuse and normal, these go with the hair. So I will need one more of these for the hair. We'll do that in a moment. And let's put our position and rotation textures here. Great. We will also need to get our max value. So let's go over here and copy paste this max value in here. And that should be everything we need. Selector is going to be what we use for changing the animations between 1, 2, 3, or 4. And I know from experience that I'm going to use the full skinning, and I'm going to turn this off, which uses the UV set for full skinning. And I see some kind of craziness here, and let's see what that looks like when we apply it to our character's body. We'll go into materials, and we will drag this onto the body slot. And what we see looks like some animation going the wrong speed. So that's quite interesting. Let's see why it's going the wrong speed. Oh, I know. Because we didn't set any of these parameters yet. So these are all controls for our specific animation. So let's set those. You get those values from our data object. That's these values here. So it's starting at 1. So here we have to tell it the number of frames that we have, when this set of animations is going to start, and what speed it's supposed to play at. So I'm going to copy the speed because it's a long floating point number with a lot of digits, and the others I can just type. So this says 29 and 1, and then I'm going to paste that number in. And now for the second animation, I'm going to do the same thing, 67, 30, and then paste it. 67, 30, and paste. That's anim 1. Anim 2, 35, 97, and paste. This alpha component of this struct is not used. Copy 96, 132 on anim 3. Paste. And on number 4, copy 44, 228, and then paste. Now let's see what we see here. Hey, it looks pretty good. Let's see these other motions. So we'll go over here to our selector and put in all of our different motions. and they all look as expected. So we just need to update this for the hair, and the best way to do that is to make an instance of our instance. Call it hair. Call this one body. And put the hair onto our character's hair slot. And now this should travel along. Looks like maybe I did something wrong with the materials. Oh yeah, it's using the body's materials, and what I need is the hair materials. So that's this one for diffuse and this one for normal. There we go. So it looks like maybe there's some weird shine. So I could work on that, obviously. She has the weird shine as well. I don't think it's related to the Vertex animation at all. So we'll leave that as a problem for later. And instead, we will close these and work on the male character next. So we need to make one of these for the male character. Now, when we do this, we want to use all these same animations. So the easiest thing to do would be to copy this over to the male characters area, give it an appropriate name so we know it's different. And then all we need to change here is down here, we need to clear this out, because if we run this again from the male character, it will just overwrite the things that we calculated originally. If we take it out and run it from the male character, we will get new data. So I want new textures and a new static mesh with the appropriate UVs. So opening up the male character, we hit bake anim and we pick the right one and let it run for a moment. And then we get a set of data for the male character. Now the documentation and that example project say that I could reuse the textures that I calculated for the female character, but I noticed that the max bone position value was different and that it kind of like almost worked, but didn't work completely. So I found this generating new textures to be easy enough. You'll have to run this anyway to get a static mesh with the appropriate UVs, so you just might as well get the textures too and ensure that your characters will animate as expected. So I'm going to do something similar here. I'm going to copy the material over to here and then rename it. I didn't name the other one sensibly. And I should have. So all we need to do is change all of these textures to point to this character's textures. Rotations, animations, and diffuse, glossy, and normal. Now I can see here that there is something that's probably for his hair, but they're looking pretty identical to me. So I'm just really going to apply this one to both and see if that works well enough. So now we need to open this. I'll apply this to both slots. Yep, looks good enough. And now let's do the same like we did over here. We'll populate our level with this. And then I'm going to try the other slots. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So they're all there, and it looks like it's working as expected. So that's the foundation of our effect. So from here, we want to now build something where we can instance this and get some variation in the instances. Let's clear this out and start making a blueprint where we can make a grid. So I've made a folder called blueprints. I'll make a blueprint of type actor. Call it crowd grid, crowd grid. And we'll make an instance static mesh component one for each character. And then on each of these, we'll define each of these characters. Now you don't see anything here when you do that, because the way this works is down here there's an instances section, and you have to add your instances here. And you can just keep hitting this and moving these things around. And this is how I did my very first test. And as we saw in that example scene, you need to add one of these, and then you get array data, and you can put a different number in here, and you'll get a different motion on each of those. But we don't want any of that. We do want this. We'll leave that here. And for the male character, we will add one custom data item. You'll need this when we go to do this in the blueprint. So here is the construction blueprint. And we're going to build something that'll make us a whole grid that we can use to fill our stands. So the first thing that we need is a sequence. And the first thing I'm going to do in this sequence is I'm going to make a random stream. And I'm going to set random stream seed. And I'm going to promote the stream to a variable. Call it random stream. And I'm going to make this seed variable as well. Now, I'm not 100% sure, but I think I might need to make a random stream. Reset seed. Do I need to make a random stream? Yeah, I think I might need to make the random stream here. And set this variable. Yeah, let's do that. That seems safer and more sensible. And this stream goes here, and this goes here. So there is a random stream setup. So right after this, we need to make a list of how many ever characters that we're going to have. So I want to set this up in a way where the characters can be, we can add more characters later, 5, 10, whatever number of characters we need, we want to add that later. And then we're going to randomly pick from that, this group, this list, one of these characters. And so the way that I worked out to do that was to make a new list and add these items to it. So I make a variable that is of that is called maybe instance static mesh list. That's not a great name, but it's good enough. And it's going to be of the type instant static mesh component object reference, and it needs to be an array. And then once we have this, we can set, no, we don't want to set items. We want to add unique to this list. And what are we adding? We're adding this. And then we do the same thing again for our other one. I'm not doing too good mousing today. We add this to this list, and there's our other one. And then we're going to do what? Start instancing. So we could just pick one of these and it will instance one of our already defined objects, but we want to pick a random one of these. We don't want to have this be the same one, or we don't want to define it in advance. So the way that we could do this is we can get from this list random array item from stream. And so we're using the stream so that we can change this random seed later and get different results. So this will instance one or the other of these things right at the origin. So that's getting close to what we want. Let's compile this. It needs a transform. So let's not compile that. Let's work out the transform next. Well, I know I'm going to lay these out in a grid. So let's add some variables for that. Num rows, and this will be a single integer. And then we need another one that is num calls. We'll also need some spacing information. So this will be row dist, and this needs to be a float. And we'll add another one that is calls dist. And that's already float. And then we need to loop over these. So we're going to loop over the number of rows and make an instance. And then we're also going to loop over the number of columns and make an instance. Now it's worth noting that this is an index that starts at 0. So we should take one away from here. Hit the minus sign. No, minus sign, minus sign. And plug that in. And do the same for this. Let's see here. And now how do I get the position that I need? I'm going to multiply the index by the distance to get its placement. So we'll do that here. I need to zoom in a little. Let's make it all bigger. Let's do that. Multiply init times float, row distance. That will be our position in the x component. And then this one, we'll do something similar. Calls distance. And split this, split this. Now we have an x value, which is coming from here, and a y value coming from here. And we'll compile, and the first thing I want to do is set some values and expose some of these so that we can change them from when we have this thing in our level. We want to be able to change these dynamically. Let's say 80, 80. And then that should give us an instance, one thing or the other. Let's compile that and see what we see in the viewport. 2 by 2, and let's change the seed. See if it changes around. Yep, great. Okay, cool. Go back over here to the construction script, and now let's add something for random, to pick a random animation. So this is going to take the, going to do that from here. We need to set a custom, I think it's called, set custom. Yeah, set custom data value. And this takes a target, and then you need the index of which of these instanced, this is going to be a whole lot of instance items, and this is going to tell you which instance item is going to get what data value. And this data value we're going to get from a random stream. So we got this stream defined over here, and let's just do And we want the one that is in a range. We only need an integer. We want the integer in the range because we know we only have 5 motions. This needs to be a 4. And this should give us a value here. It split this into a float because this is setting a float value. But we know that we only have 5 motions, 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. So that's all fine. This should now, I think, show us different motions on everybody. And it does. Okay, that's great. Now let's put it in our level. And make it even bigger. So let's go way back here. And add some more rows and some more people. And let's say we wanted a different one. Great. So that is doing what we want, but we see a significant amount of repetition. So the motions are very repetitive. One of the main things that is causing that is that they're all starting at the same time. So that one's fairly easy to fix. Let's go to our master material and add a new variable here, which is going to be another random. So per instance random will give you random digits that you can use for all kinds of things to add randomization. They're even using one here. We're going to use this one to offset time and therefore get a different piece of motion. So all this needs is an add to offset time. We'll just add some random number to time and save that. And we could see, we should be able to see right away. Now they are not exactly the same. Now our sequences are still very short, so they will not look all that great. And I can see that one of these motions would need to be modified. Like this guy needs to be brought forward so his feet are in the right place for a standing guy. So on this row, basically. So this guy's feet should be here. So some of those kind of things you will need to fix up. But that's the gist of how you would get these randomizations. So adding more people, that's one thing you can do. And the last thing that you can do is change their textures. Get some texture variation. And I'll show you that in my finished scene. I won't recreate that. I'll just show you what I've done in my finished scene. Here I am in my demo scene that I showed you earlier. And let's look at the characters here. We'll just look at one of the same characters that we have and the textures. So in here, I've done a little bit more modification to what happens on the base color. One of the key modifications is this mask that I added. So if we scroll around here, maybe it's helpful if I show you the original texture. If we look at the original texture, you can see that she's got these stripes here defined on the top. There's the shoes. Here's the pants. And so what I've done is on my first try, I thought maybe I would just paint the stripes out and color them. And that didn't really do enough. But I kept it painted out. And I also tried using a mask. So here's a mask that I made. And I found that the mask was really flexible. So I didn't paint out anybody else's textures. I just made these quick and dirty masks. And then over in my material, I'm using that mask and multiplying it by, well, a few things. One thing here is just a straight up random color. So this is a small texture. Let's show you this one. Very small texture, and it's just going to pick a point on this texture and use that for a color. But I also made this costume switcher, which is almost entirely based on the animation switcher. So I used the same exact technique that the animation switcher is using, and it's switching between these pretty simple textures you could see here. So these simple textures are multiplied by this simple color and whatever's coming in from the maps. And that's pretty much how I did that. All right. Thank you for your time. I hope that helps somebody out there, and come back again.